Looking through the comments on your YouTube channel the other day. That is easily the most random opening for a video I have ever done. And it's not even connected to what I'm talking about today. So even if you got what I was on about, that was just the thing I decided to do. I suppose because that's a genuine joke, and the topic today is not fun. So, this is kind of a soft follow-up to the video that I made about J.K. Rowling's appearance in the Epstein files. I say soft follow-up because it is in no way about that specifically, but it's about what went on in the comments to that video. Not massively. I guess I want to throw this out there right at the start. What I'm going to be talking about and addressing was not the majority of comments. It is, in fact, the minority of comments. It's even more of a minority now than it was before. I'll get into very specifically what had happened, but I'm going to say right up front that I do, in fact, moderate my own comments, if you weren't aware of that. And I am fairly liberal swinging the ban hammer. I don't do a lot of multiple strikes. I give some leeway to people who I know have been around the channel for a while. If they're overstepping a line, maybe I'll try and be like, okay, calm down. But sometimes there are lines that you cross where it doesn't matter how long you've been in these comments and been fine up to this point. There are some lines I will just toss you out. That wasn't really what happened here. So briefly, if you didn't see the video that I made on Rowling, I expect that you likely did if you're seeing this, because I guarantee you this is going to get less views. But regardless, just in case, that video was about how, yes, it is a fact that J.K. Rowling appears in the Epstein files. However, the way I was seeing the conversation around that very quickly spiral into conspiracy theories that weren't even recognizing that they were conspiracy theories. People layering things that they were saying that were based on assumptions that were based on earlier assumptions that they made, and then saying something like it's a definitive thing that they can conclude where it bears very little resemblance to actual reality. And I was annoyed at having to make that because, as I said in that video, truth matters. I don't like conspiratorial thinking. I don't care what side of the aisle it's on, and I don't like letting it run rampant if I think I have a chance to do even anything about it. So I made that video, and the vast majority of people took it in the spirit in which it was intended, which was, this is not a defense of J.K. Rowling, but y'all are talking nonsense, and there's actual damage that she's doing that we should be focused on instead of making stuff up. And another thing that I kind of wish I'd point out is this kind of conspiratorial nonsense also distracts from the actual victims who, were the people whose lives were destroyed by people in those files. If you're putting attention on someone like Rowling when there are actual monsters who are actually in there, and many of them not being held accountable, you are distracting from what actually should be coming out of these damn things. I wish I'd made that point. I'm making it now. But again, most people understood where I was coming from, even though some people did express a little bit of I was hoping that this would be really destructive. Oh, well, all right then, which honestly was kind of how I felt. But there was a small number of people that made arguments and took positions that I've seen before. And I kind of want to deal with them in the abstract and in the bigger picture. A lot of the kinds of comments I'm going to be talking about, you won't actually find on the video anymore. Like I said, I'm kind of liberal with the ban hammer, and most of the people who were doing this ended up doing one of two things that made me ban them from commenting further. Either, aside from the one initial comment that they made that making the argument like what I'm going to be talking about in a minute, they then started going through all the other comments in the video and trying to start fights with everybody. I don't care what your position is. If you're doing that, you're a dickhead, and I will get rid of you. And then there was one in particular who I tried to engage with because I know this person had been around on the channel for a little bit and had been fine up to this point. I tried to engage with them. I even gave as much leeway on the issue as I was ever going to give, and it didn't go well. So what is it that I'm actually talking about? Well, to put it very simply, there were people who felt that even if I was not defending Rowling in the purest sense, that not only should I not have made the video, but in fact, it would be better to spread the misinformation because it's damaging to her and she's a terrible person. Some of them worded it differently than that, but that was the gist of it. It was okay to spread deliberate disinformation. Reminder on the semantics. Misinformation is when you misspeak and you don't realize what you're saying is wrong. Disinformation, you are fully aware that what you're saying is nonsense. You say it anyway. But to deliberately spread disinformation because, well, people like her do this to us, why can't we do it back? And here's the thing. I'm going to go into why not, but here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not coming at this from a place of moral superiority. What you won't hear me say is, because we're better than that. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not going to make an argument from a place of moral superiority. I have said elsewhere that if the only reason you have to do something is the principle of the thing, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a consequentialist. I care a lot more about the outcomes of things than any kind of moral purity. And you will also never hear me make the argument violence is never an appropriate response or is never an option. You will not ever hear me say that we can't push back, that we have to be better than them, that, when they go low, we go high. I've said it elsewhere, you go low, I'll come down to your level and kick your ass. But I still stand by that video and believe that it was wrong if you knew that what was being said about her potential links to Epstein were being blown out of proportion and you spread what you knew was bad information on purpose. That is wrong. And that is a bad idea, not just from some moral absolutism. And we're going to get into why. Because it's been a little while since I've had to deal with this. The only other time that I've dealt with this kind of thing very directly was when I made a video about why it is never appropriate to deliberately and knowingly misgender or dead name trans or non-binary people, even if they're terrible people. Ezra Miller, Blair White, Caitlyn Jenner, whatever you think about them, and I have no respect for any of those people and quite a few others besides, it's still not okay to purposefully dead name or misgender them. I go into a lot of the reasons why in that video if you want the full breakdown, but the short version is because if you do, then you are building a world in which it is acceptable to revoke a trans or non-binary person's identity for the right reasons. It's not as if that's the only line of attack. There are plenty of things you can point out about any of those people that are totally valid and do not require you to revoke their identity. And once you do that, you have capitulated to the idea that it is sometimes okay to revoke someone's very identity. And I think that makes a worse world. I think that there are some tactics, some things that we don't do not because we're better than them. I don't care if we're better than them. By what metric? So what? What I care about is the world that gets built. I'm going to read some quotes from one of the few of these that is still up, because this is the person who put it, I'd say, the most politely. It started with the comment, "I think your analysis hinges on the idea that right-wingers actually think about things that are constrained by reality. I don't think that's the case." Now, I responded to that, and I said, no, no, I don't actually think that. But I said kind of what I said just now. I think deliberately spreading misinformation and disinformation makes the world worse in an actual tangible way. They replied with the following. "My understanding is that while the evidence in the Epstein files doesn't damn her entirely, it also doesn't exonerate her. And I don't think she's earned any good faith interpretations from anybody. So with that in mind, if we have an opportunity to take down J.K. Rowling, would it not be in the interest of the greater good from a harm reduction standpoint? Basically, she is so harmful. If this can damage her standing by emphasizing and possibly even exaggerating the ties that she has to Epstein, then isn't that a good thing in the end? Aren't we removing a harmful element? And there is an argument to be made there, but ultimately it's one I don't agree with. I mentioned I'm a pragmatist, I'm a consequentialist. I don't really care all that much about what someone's motives are, what their thought process is, what their intent with what they do is. I'm not saying it has no value to me, but it will always be superseded by the practical outcome of what they do. I care a lot more about the impact of what you do and what you say than the thought process behind it. Because there are some things that I think are harmful to the point that I don't really care what reasons you have for doing them. It's part of what frustrated me very early on with people who would kind of be soft defenders of Rowling. Not defending her position, but in the early days, it was very common, especially from Harry Potter fans, to go, well, okay, I think she's just misinformed. We just need to educate her. That didn't pan out. And ultimately, for me, even at the time, my thoughts were, okay, if anyone's going to be able to, randos on the internet can't. It's going to be people who actually know her. And it seems like she's cutting herself off from the people who might actually say that to her. Because ultimately, whether she came to her anti-trans positions through bigotry or ignorance, the damage is the same either way. And to be clear, at this point, regardless of whether it started from a place of ignorance, it's bigotry now. But regardless, in the earlier days when maybe people were a little less sure, does she just not understand or is she actually hateful? For my purposes, it didn't matter. The damage she was doing was the same either way, and I cared a hell of a lot more about that. And you might think, well, doesn't that make you kind of an ends justify the means kind of person then? If you care a lot more about the outcome, shouldn't you be okay with this? Well, no, because it's more nuanced than that. And as I said, I do care about the practical outcome, but I'm not just looking at the practical outcome of, will this harm Rowling? I mean, we could have an entire conversation about whether or not trying to damage her reputation in this way would actually meaningfully harm her standing in any way, shape, or form. People who support her are going to keep supporting her. People who don't want to think about her at all are going to continue to not want to think about her at all. I don't see how this is going to move the needle, but that's not the bigger issue for me. The bigger issue is that even if you use a tactic like deliberate, knowing misinformation and disinformation to harm her standing, and even if it works, even if she loses influence, loses support, people actually start seriously boycotting Harry Potter related stuff, even if that did happen, I still would not think it's worth it because it makes the world a worse place. Because what you create when enough people make the decision that truth doesn't matter, reality doesn't matter, facts don't matter, all that matters is how can I take the semblance of those things and twist it in a way that either helps me or hurts the people who I don't like. When both sides of a divide decide that they're both going to do that, then what you are building is a world in which truth is irrelevant. All that matters is what you can do to harm the opposition. Whether or not it's based in truth is irrelevant. Does it hurt them? Awesome. Do it. That's not a world I want to live in, and I won't help build it. Here's the capitulation that I was prepared to make. If, and I wouldn't have been super comfortable with this, but if I only ever saw things go to the extent of people saying, J.K. Rowling was in the Epstein files and leaving it at that and letting implication do however much lifting it was going to do, I wouldn't have been super comfortable with that, but I also wouldn't have felt the need to make a video about it. It was because they were actually extrapolating out into stuff that I don't think were defensible positions in a lot of cases that I felt the need to say something. Because you weren't just letting the implication do the damage. A lot of you, whether you meant to or not, were spinning nonsense and degrading reality and degrading the truth. Now, the position of a lot of people, and especially most of the ones that I blocked, and even the one that I quoted here, is that, well, they already do this to us. Why shouldn't we also use this tool, this weapon that they use against us and seems to be pretty effective? One can debate about the effectiveness. I would say the effectiveness of this kind of stuff has a lot to do with who you send it out to. I don't mean who you target. I mean, there were a lot of conservative but also politically unengaged people who were riled up by, yes, frequently lies, especially in regards to trans people. There are even some left-leaning people who get wrapped up in lies told about trans people. They wield a lot of lies against us. If there are lies that are helpful for us in that they hurt the people hurting us, shouldn't we use the same tactics? No. Because as frustrating and infuriating as it is to watch the right lie with impunity and appear to get away with it, it makes the world a worse place if nobody is saying this is not just morally wrong, it's factually wrong, and facts and reality matter. When both sides have decided that the truth is irrelevant, then no matter who succeeds, the world is worse. Because if you think you can wield something like that and then just stuff the genie back in the bottle once the specific people that you don't like that you wielded that against are gone, you are incredibly naive and very foolish. What people making that point and those arguments are arguing for is the cultural and truth equivalent of nuclear brinksmanship. They have a nuke, we should have a nuke. They're dropping nukes, let's start dropping our nukes. What's left at the end of that? A world in which what matters has no bearing on the actual things that get said, spread, pushed, and drilled into everybody's minds and into their thoughts and into their political positions. And again, you can argue that a lot of the right already does this, and I will not disagree. Regardless of effectiveness, there are some things that I think if this becomes a universal tactic, it makes the entire world worse to a degree that I simply do not believe that we gain more from using it than we lose. And I also don't think it's necessary. Because if somebody is going to be swayed by a lie, how helpful is that person? If there were people who were not prepared to go against J.K. Rowling up to this point, but suddenly because you spun some nonsense and claimed, oh, she totally met him at that New York premiere of her play, there is zero evidence that she did. If any evidence ever comes out, trust me, I will tell you. But zero evidence of that, but you say that like that's a fact, then all you are doing is deciding nobody needs to know what reality is. It doesn't matter anymore. We can say whatever we want. And who exactly is going to be swayed hearing that, who hasn't already heard everything else about her and still supports her? How many people do you think you're going to get? Enough to take her down? No. I know we like to imagine the centrists who could be lured over to the other side. That is largely a fiction. People who claim to be centrists are generally either right-leaning but don't want to be open about that, or they are politically unengaged. They take a center position because they don't know enough to take a firm position on any given issue or many given issues, and they don't want to have to learn enough to actually do that. You can't forcibly educate a person. We couldn't do it for J.K. Rowling. Why do you think it's going to work for somebody else? And why do you think it would work with a lie any more than the actual truth and reality does? If people have decided that what she's doing is okay or they don't care what she's doing? Why would you think a lie about how, oh, she totally went to the island, that's why her yacht records were deleted? Okay, yeah, look, I put in a note and a pinned comment on that. Yes, I'm aware her yacht records were deleted. She didn't own the yacht until 2023. He'd been dead for 4 years by then. So while it is incredibly suspicious that she deleted the previously publicly available records of where her yacht had docked, if it has anything to do with Epstein, it can't be with her. She didn't have the boat yet. Is it possible that either of the previous two owners might have taken it to the island and there was a record that was older than her ownership she was wiping out? Possibly, but neither of the two previous owners of that yacht are named in the files. So, while possible, zero evidence. And again, it's how fast this stuff spreads. And I understand. When I looked into the Epstein stuff, I would have been thrilled if I could have made concrete connections. Fuck them. Fuck anybody who actually has a tangible connection to that man and is trying to deny it or trying to hide it. But there's no evidence that that's the case for her. Not really. And if you are told that and informed that and fact-checked about that, but go, no, I don't care, I'm going to keep saying it, you're building a world that I don't want. And I think if you stop and think about it, you probably don't want either. Again, I don't believe in a purity of tactics, broadly speaking. I'm at this position not because that's just wrong. I'm at this position because the long-term impact of deciding that's an acceptable tactic wrecks anything. It makes a world where even if you win, it's going to suck. And it's not going to stop sucking. And I won't be party to that. There are times where there isn't a lot we can do, and that sucks. But I call myself a pragmatist and a consequentialist because when those things come up and we find ourselves in those situations, my instinct is to look at, okay, could do this. Maybe there's some good outcome of that, but what's the actual long-term outcome of committing to that? If I decide that that's worse, then I think you shouldn't do that. And again, this isn't a new conversation. I said I've seen it already with dead naming and misgendering on purpose, trans people who you don't like. And before that, again, largely around J.K. Rowling, I remember a conversation back around, 2022, 2023, where there were certain people who certainly present themselves as leftist. I would argue they're not, but they present themselves as such, who were legitimately making an argument that it was okay to be deliberately sexist and misogynist towards J.K. Rowling, because of how horrible her positions have become and how right-wing her views, especially on gender, have become. And that was wrong too. Because even if that had succeeded in any way, which obviously it didn't, but even if it had, all you've done is take her down by making a world in which it's okay to tear into somebody because they're a woman. And to call them awful, misogynist, sexist things if they are the wrong kind of woman. That's exactly what transphobes do, for the record. It's the same reason why I'm not okay with people who do fat jokes and body shame Trump. The man's a goddamn monster. All you've got is that he's fat. It's the same reason why I will never be okay with people slut-shaming Melania Trump. I mean, first of all, whether or not she was ever a sex worker at any point is debatable at best. But even if she was, you don't actually care about that. You just want an excuse to call her a whore and feel justified for it. And you make the world a worse place. You make it less safe for the people who are those things, who are fat, who are trans, who are women, who are whores, but who aren't terrible people. Because you decided that it was okay to go after something that a bunch of people who are not these monsters also are. Or you decided that we don't have to worry about the reality of anything. We can just make up whatever we want. Great. That means everything's on the table and nobody is safe, nobody is protected, and the truth no longer functions as a shield for anything. And of course, again, Do the right just batter down the truth with their bullshit? Yes, of course they do. Why do you think you're going to make things better if you do the same goddamn thing? It's not a tactic that translates. The right lies because they have to. Their ideas are cruel and don't work. Of course they have to lie. Of course billionaires have to lie and pump money into things that will stop climate change progress because they want what they have or they want more of it and they won't let go of it. And the only way to keep hold of it is with lies because the truth is there shouldn't be such a thing as a billionaire. None of these people should have the amount of power that they do. The ideas of the right, and especially the far right, are harmful. Not like philosophically or morally, tangibly harmful. They are cruel policies and cruel ideas that leave people starving, out in the cold, without fresh water, in cages, dead in the street. They have to lie to sell their bad ideas. We don't, or at least we shouldn't. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you feel the need to lie, then you have no faith in what it is you're doing. And again, this is not a moral absolutist thing. I'm not saying like truth will out. No, you have to fight every day for truth. We are learning that in real time, because if you don't, it will be buried in bullshit. But you have to fight for it, because if you abandon it, then it's not there for anybody. And we're all fucked. You can see that this really gets under my skin. Seeing people who ostensibly agree with me get mad that I made a statement that the truth matters because it happened to be in relation to somebody that they don't like and I don't like either, but apparently they decided, oh, well, I don't like her enough that it's worth just throwing away reality. That's not a world I want to live in, and I won't stand idle while other people do it. I needed to get that off my chest, because it was not that many comments, but boy, it bothered me. And again, I get the frustration, looking at the progress the right has made and how much of it is built on lies, and thinking, well, maybe we can just lie better. I feel like people take that position because they want the catharsis of feeling like they're hitting back with the same thing that they see their side get hit with. And I understand the desire to feel like you're swinging back as hard as you're getting swung at. I get that. But in this instance, has that tactic worked for them? Yeah, but don't adopt it. So, thank you for hearing me out. Take care of yourselves out there. You see why I started with a joke now? Because this wasn't fun. Take care of yourselves. Be well, be safe, but be kind. And whatever your thoughts are on any of this, keep them polite if you can. Drop them down in the comments and let's talk about it. If you feel like supporting what it is I do and think that what I do matters at all, I have a Patreon, and that is what enables me to do this as my living. But even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe, whatever, what I want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lafula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Pickapock, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Twilord, Tracy Scrabbit, Palbro Rabajoggle, Cindy Ella, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and thanking some random folks from my lower tiers of support. Thank you, Pippa Barwell, Mandy Walla, and Jessica, the Trans Metal Alchemist. The boys are back, and we've got a new one here. We have Navarro has joined the mischief. Okay, so that's just what we're doing now. All right.